A ghost testified in an American courtroom, and a man was convicted of murder. We'll start at the beginning. The neighbors noticed the high-necked dress, the veil, the carefully packed cloth on either side of her head. It was January 1897. A young woman, dead at 23, and her husband never once left the head of that casket. He paced, he guarded it. When mourners stepped close to pay their respects, he was already there, positioning himself like a man protecting a secret. Most of the room assumed he was grieving. Mary Jane Heaster was not most of the room. She was the young woman's mother, and as she watched the man arrange the cloth, she knew it was not to comfort her daughter. She knew he was hiding something. She just couldn't prove it. Not yet. January 23rd, 1897. Greenbrier County, West Virginia. It was a bitterly cold day when a local boy sent on a simple errand walked up to the cabin of Erasmus Trout Shue and his new bride, Elva, known to everyone as Zona. The boy knocked. Silence. When he pushed the door open, he found Zona lying at the foot of the stairs, stretched out straight, feet together, one hand resting on her stomach, clearly dead. By the time the local physician, Dr. George Knapp, arrived to examine the body, Trout Shue had already taken complete control. Against all local customs, Shue had washed and dressed his wife's body himself. He placed her in a high-necked dress with a stiff collar and secured a veil over her face. When Dr. Knapp tried to examine her head and neck, Shue flew into a violent, sobbing rage, cradling her head and refusing to let go. Shaken, Dr. Knapp backed off, officially listing the cause of death as an everlasting faint. At the funeral, the whispers started. Trout Shue never left the head of the casket. He paced. He guarded it like a sentry. He even placed a folded sheet on one side of Zona's head and a garment on the other, claiming it would help her rest easier. To the mourners paying their respects, it looked like he was propping her head up. But to Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, it looked like he was hiding something. Mary Jane never liked Trout Shue. She felt it in her bones that he had killed her daughter, but in 1897, a mother's intuition wasn't enough to secure an arrest warrant. She needed proof. So, Mary Jane did the only thing she could do. She went home, took down the sheet from her bed, and prayed every night for weeks. She demanded that Zona return and reveal the truth. And then, the prayer was answered. For 4 consecutive nights, the temperature in Mary Jane's bedroom plummeted. A bright light filled the room, slowly taking the shape of her daughter. The specter didn't just stand there, she spoke. The ghost of Zona Heaster told her mother that Trout was abusive, that he had attacked her in a rage. And then, as the apparition turned to leave, it slowly turned its head, entirely around. The ghost told Mary Jane exactly what Trout had done. He had broken her neck at the first joint. Armed with the impossible testimony of a ghost, Mary Jane Heaster didn't go to a priest. She went to the prosecuting attorney, John Alfred Preston. Preston was a man of the law, not a man of folklore. He listened to her wild story about a glowing apparition. But what actually caught his attention wasn't the phantom. It was the specific anatomical detail the ghost provided, a broken neck at the first joint. Preston approached Dr. George Knapp, who admitted that Trout Shue's violent outbursts had prevented a thorough examination of the body. That was enough. Preston ordered an exhumation. On February 22, 1897, authorities marched to the local cemetery. Trout Shue was forced to attend. As the shovels hit the frozen dirt, Shue paced furiously, complaining about the cold and loudly declaring that they would not be able to prove he did it. It was the frantic behavior of a cornered man. There was no modern morgue in the rural mountains, so they carried Zona's muddy casket into the local one-room schoolhouse. Dr. Knapp, assisted by 2 other physicians, prepared to conduct an autopsy. This time, Shu wasn't allowed anywhere near the body. The doctors began their grim work. They spent 3 days examining the remains, carefully searching for what the ghost had promised them. First, they found the bruising. Dark, finger-shaped contusions layered across the front of Zona's neck. Then, they examined the throat. The official medical report noted that the windpipe was crushed entirely. This wasn't an everlasting faint. This was a brutal, sustained strangulation. But the most damning piece of evidence was yet to come. The doctors opened the neck and examined the spine. Just as Mary Jane Heaster claimed her daughter's ghost had whispered in the dark, the neck was broken. The ligaments were torn and ruptured. The dislocation was located precisely between the first and second cervical vertebrae. The ghost had been right. The folklore was backed by hard, undeniable forensic science. Trout Shu was immediately arrested for murder. But arresting a man is not convicting him. In a court of law, a dead woman was not a witness. Prosecutor Preston had the bones. He had the injury. He had the precise location of the dislocation between the first and second cervical vertebrae, exactly where Zona's ghost said to look. What he didn't have was a story he could tell 12 men without them walking out of the room. Because the only witness who had seen what happened, the only one who named him, described the wound, and been right about every detail, was Zona Heaster Shu. And Zona Heaster Shu was dead. The trial of Erasmus Trout Shu began in June of 1897, and from the start, the prosecution had a problem. Prosecutor Preston knew that if he mentioned the ghost, the defense would laugh him out of the room, so he stuck strictly to the science. He put Dr. Knapp on the stand to testify about the crushed windpipe and the dislocated vertebrae. Trout Shu sat at the defense table, smiling. He was confident he was going to walk free. But then, Trout Shu's own defense attorney, a man named William Rucker, made one of the most spectacular blunders in American legal history. Rucker wanted to make Mary Jane Heaster look insane. He wanted the jury to think she was a hysterical, superstitious old mountain woman. So, during cross-examination, he brought up the ghost. He badgered her, demanding to know if it was truly an apparition or just a dream. Mary Jane didn't flinch. She sat in the witness stand and confidently described the cold, the light, and the ghost of her daughter. When Rucker asked if she was simply dreaming, she fired back on the record, "No, sir, it was no dream. I was as wide awake as I ever was." The defense's plan backfired disastrously. Mary Jane was so steadfast, so totally unshakable that the jury believed her. Not only did she not look crazy, but her testimony legally corroborated the physical autopsy. The judge instructed the jury that they couldn't base a conviction on a ghost story, but the damage was done. It took the jury just 1 hour and 10 minutes to find Trout Shu guilty of first-degree murder. The ghost had successfully testified. It's an incredible piece of folklore, but what if there was never a ghost at all? Modern historians, most notably Katie Letcher-Lyle, have pored over these records and proposed a terrifyingly brilliant theory. Mary Jane Heaster wasn't a hysterical woman seeing ghosts. She was a strategic mastermind. Mary Jane Heaster didn't need to personally handle her daughter's body to know something was wrong. She was at that viewing. She watched Trout Shu pace at the head of the casket like a man protecting a secret. She saw the high-necked dress in the middle of winter, the veil, the carefully packed cloth on either side of Zona's head. Every neighbor in that room noticed those things, but Mary Jane was her mother. She noticed what they meant. Trout Shu had been married before, twice. His first marriage ended in a divorce his community back in Droop Mountain considered scandalous. His second wife, Lucy Ann Tritt, was dead within a year of their wedding. no clear cause. Neighbors later said she seemed frightened of him. But Shu was new to Greenbrier County, and Zona had fallen hard and fast, the way young women sometimes do when a stranger arrives with charm and no history anyone can immediately verify. Mary Jane had heard the whispers around town. She'd had her doubts, but Zona wouldn't listen. Now she was in a box, and this time Mary Jane intended to be heard. A woman in 1897 West Virginia couldn't simply walk into a prosecutor's office and accuse her son-in-law of murder. There were no fingerprints, no forensic pathology, no crime scene photographs. What existed was a husband's word and a coroner who'd already signed off. Mary Jane needed something that would force an exhumation, something her community, her jury, would find undeniable. She didn't need evidence. She needed a miracle, so she provided one. Think back to that moment in the courtroom. The defense attorney calls her to the stand, certain he can destroy her credibility. And she doesn't waver, not once. Every detail, the 4 visits, the turned neck, the cold, consistent, unwavering. The attorney walked away shaken. But what if that wasn't faith? What if that was a woman who had rehearsed the only story she knew they'd listen to and told it perfectly every single time? Here's what we know for certain. Zona Heister Shu was murdered. Erasmus Trout Shu was convicted, and a woman who had every reason to lie told a story that, by any rational standard, should not have worked. Whether Mary Jane Heister spoke to her daughter's ghost or simply loved her enough to become one herself, the result was the same: justice, in a place and time that had no other way to deliver it. Erasmus Trout Shu died in the West Virginia Penitentiary in 1900. Today, a state historical marker stands near the cemetery where Zona is buried, officially recognizing it as the only case in American history where the testimony of a ghost helped convict a murderer. Was Mary Jane Heister truly visited by the spirit of her murdered daughter from beyond the veil? Or did she orchestrate the most brilliant, supernatural long con in legal history to bring a killer to justice? The question has been open for 128 years. Leave your verdict in the comments.